Today on American Outlaw, I want to tell you one of the things that made me a gun guy and one of the things that made me a 1911 guy, and that was actually this pistol and Ken Hackathorn. So it is Ken Hackathorn inside of a magazine. He's way younger, he's wearing a black helmet, and he's shooting an OD green this pistol, Wilson Combat, in one of those magazines. I think it's Soldier of Fortune, but I can't remember. Right above it is a Wilson Combat deal. So anyway, as we're doing this, as I see this magazine article, and guys, remember, this is 90s, 97, 98, 99, something like this. And maybe it was 99. And Ken is inside in this magazine. He's wearing a black helmet, and he's got this Wilson CQB, and it's OD green. And I'm like, I'm going to buy a Wilson Combat one day. And I finally got to, I think in 2004, 2005, but our police departments were allowing people to switch guns. Because at this time, what you guys don't know now is you guys are like, Glock is the cop gun, and that's it. That's what you know. Or now SIG 320. Back then, in 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, that little group of area, Glock was competing against HK USP really hard. Nobody really had Smith & Wesson 5906 was the gun that our guys were getting issued, or the SIG 226 or 220. No, not 226. Nobody wanted to shoot 9mm back then. We'll talk about that one in another video, but um, SIG 220 was a big one. And then guys that were more gun guys wanted a 1911. And so that was where I got my first exposure to Ken Hackathorn, Wilson Combat, and I eventually bought one of these, and I got broke. Hell, I went bankrupt. Like I think I've told you guys that story. Maybe not, but I went bankrupt, sold all my guns to pay payroll, and have told myself that I'm going to buy one back. I found two the other day, but now that I realize the OD Green story. But anyway, tell us about this gun, especially the OD Green, and why you came up with it.
Well, Bill and I have been friends for 50 years. And when he started building guns, initially he built guns on, you sent him your Colt or Springfield Armor or whatever, and they customized. Eventually, Bill decided sometime in the 90s to come out and start building, supplying guns. And the first ones he did, by the way, were cast-beam slides and frames. And the first one I talked him into making actually it was called the Spec Ops, cast-beam slide and frame. And I'd been down at Fort Bragg training the guys over on the corner of McKellar's and Lamont. And I saw some of those guys had 1911s in their holsters, but the frame was OD green, the slide was black. And I asked them about it. The guns had been sent to Walter Birdsong for what was called black tea, which was one of the first polymer finishes available. And as you know, black shows up in night vision. So the gun in the holster, and they would, even then, they were wearing some Fireland holsters, the early 6004s. They'd spray paint them, camouflage them or whatever. And so they didn't show up. But the guns, basically black guns show up. So they had the frames painted black or what was then green tea from Birdsong, and they didn't show up with night vision. And the two-tone look, I thought, that is really cool. I love that. And so when I had Wilson, we were talking about doing a kind of I've come up with a name, kind of sketchy as it turns out now, but Spec Ops for kind of what we'll call a fighting, not a, remember, his big market was the IPSC, USPSA competition world, kind of more of a fighting gun or service gun. And I said, I want you to do it with, because he was using gun coat, predates Cerakote. Gun coat was the finish back then. And I said, well, do it with a black slide and an OD green frame. And they did build it. And I can remember when they first built it, the guys who worked on it, they all were hooting and laughing. They called it the frog gun. They thought it was uglier than could be. And the bottom line, so the original one I had was the two-tone green. And then I had it for a while, and then later on he said, we're thinking about offering that gun. Because he actually went, people don't realize early on, if I remember correctly, in this era, this gun was, I'm not 100% sure, but I think Kimber was supplying the frames and slides. They weren't finished. They finished them in-house and fitted them, but he was buying his components from, I think, Kimber. And he said, well, what do you think about making that spec ops? And I said, well, actually, spec ops is not good. I said, I'll tell you the name. I think would be cool because back then, close quarter battles, CQB was a new thing. And I said, call it the CQB. And this one was built for me in probably around 94, 95, 96. And you know, it's back when it's marketed as the Wilson Combat Service Grade. And serial number on it, by the way, is 954, and it's really number 54. Nines were kind of they didn't want to say they hadn't made very many guns. Anyway, the bottom line, he built this gun for me, and it was originally green, bottom black top. Well, this gun has been shot a lot. It's been rebuilt twice, and the last time I had them rebuild it, they now are doing Cerakote. They call it something gun armor tough. What is Cerakote? And I thought, you know, hey, do it with a gray, like a battleship gray bottom and a black top. So, but it was originally green. And this gun, if you look at it, you can tell this gun has been carried and used a bit. Ivory stocks, um, and I use this as a training gun, as a competing gun, as a demonstrating gun. I mean, this teaching gun, it, you know, early on I had the gold bead front sight on it. I think this is the second barrel. This gun's got over 70,000 rounds through it. And I quit counting because I didn't care anymore. And a lot of parts replaced. There's some parts that were pretty badly worn on it. And it became, the CQB became his number one seller, the most in-demand gun. And at one point, you know, they made so many models of pistols, if you remember, you almost needed a GPS to get through their catalog. It was, and they made us, I think, a smart move and said, we're going to simplify our product line and limit it to certain models. And we're basically going to, since most all the guns they made were technically somewhat derivatives of the CQB, we're going to, today they offer the CQB and the CQB Elite. And then you can configure it about any way you want with add-ons and takeoffs and stuff. So technically the CQB is kind of the base to the Wilson Combat Single Stack 1911 line. And I can say this is one of the very first ones, and it served me well. People ask me, you know, guys check and say, wait, it's not real tight. Yeah, you know, if you got 70,000 rounds through, you're not going to be real tight either. It works just fine. You know, people often say, well, the slide to frame fit's not real tight. Slide to frame fit has nothing to do with accuracy. People don't understand that. The old deal, it controls the accuracy from this ear to this ear. It's headspace. Think about this. What matters is barrel fit to the slide. That's what's critical, because what happens is you align the sights every shot. As long as the barrel and the slide are lined up together, the gun will shoot fine. Now, if you take this pistol and put it in a machine rest to test it, which everybody wants to prove that their guns are accurate, in a machine rest, it doesn't realign the sights, realigns the frame. So you have to have a tight slide to frame fit to have a gun shoot good in machine rest. That's what everybody does. So when a guy gets a 1911 today, before they do, they pick up first thing, they check for slide to frame fit, they push on the barrel hood, and then they check the trigger. That's the sequence we go through. And if the gun's not real tight, it's like, oh man, this gun's not going to be very accurate. Actually, it's going to be a lot more accurate than you can shoot, because slide to frame fit has hardly anything to do with accuracy. Because we realign the sights, machine rest realigns the frame. So anyway, this has been a great gun. They've sold a blue million of them. They make them in numerous calibers. I think now 9 and 45 are the big ones. This is originally a 45. I've got a couple of them. I've got one they did for me back in the day that was polished blue with ivory stalks. But this is one I've used. This is kind of in my shooting bag, my go-to gun. And like I say, if you look at it, you can say, whoa, there's a lot of wear on this gun. And my answer is, yeah, that's honest wear.
So I think something that is that we miss, where I say I bridge the gap between you guys watching probably and Ken. Um, like I vividly remember wanting a Wilson Combat CQB. I mean, I really, really wanted it. And, you know, I remember Charlie's gun shop in Albuquerque, New Mexico would start letting cops, you know, make biweekly payments on them, which was really cool. I mean, it was awesome of that old man back then. Um, it's called CQB now. And so some people now is like, hey, that's kind of generic. It wasn't a word back then. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't. CQB was, it's not what we said. I don't even remember CQB being said until mid 2000s as a
Yeah.
point.
After GWAT, it started to catch on.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to be pretty much dialed in, and I was to a large degree because I was working and training folks in that environment. Um, and it became where almost the Wilson Combat CQB became synonymous with Wilson Combat 1911s. And I tell people, remember, Delta used 1911s, customized 1911s. The Marine MUSOCs, they were using them. I mean, a lot of your LAPD SWAT, a lot of your special operations people, this was the gun of choice, 1911s. And so the CQP name kind of caught on with those folks. Average folks didn't know what it was. Go forward a decade, 2005's GWAT. Then people started hearing more and more of it. Close quarter battles, CQB. I'm trained in CQB, or I want to learn CQB or whatever. And it's kind of this fantasy world. People want, if I get this gun, that means I'm an operator. Well, maybe not, but bottom line, it still remains one of their best sellers. Uh, Bill Wilson has made a couple bucks off these guns. This one in particular, I tell people it's got Ivory stocks. If you look it up close, they've been on the gun since day one, and they show it. What's interesting about Ivory stocks, and I know you're a fan, guys say, well, I carry my gun. If you look at a guy who carries a gun, I'm right-handed, so the grip that's on the outside is more dinged up and dull because it rubs up against stuff. The gun on the inside of my body, close to my clothing, between a little bit of heat and moisture and sweat and the garment, polishing it, look how shiny it is and a little bit more yellowed. This one still looks more white because it's constantly getting rub against stuff. This one's kind of taking on a little yellow color, and you'll see what they call the bark ivory is showing up more, and it's nice and smooth and polished. So when you can look at the gun that somebody says they carry, and the contour and the condition of those two stocks will tell you whether they do or not. Most people don't carry Ivory stock guns, and in today's world they're so bloody expensive. I understand why. Well, that gun's always had them, and it'll have them when I don't have it anymore.
Yeah, when I think of a 1911, that's what I think of, blued with ivory stocks. And I do realize now that I'm getting into custom 1911s. I really couldn't afford them when I was in my 20s. Now that I'm in my 40s, I can afford them. Some of them I can't afford. And this is what I thought of when I thought of a 1911. It was when I thought of a cop. When I thought
There was a time in America when you identified that I want a really top of the line 1911. The Wilson Combat CQB was the gun that everybody.
this was it. Like
This,
I didn't even know that there were other builders. Ted Yost, or I guess Jason Burton wasn't a builder back then, or Swinson, or I didn't even know any of those guys. I only knew Wilson Combat CQB.
they owned that world back then. Not so much today.
No, no. Today there's a lot of great builders out there, a lot of great guns out there. But this was it. This was it for me. This is This is where it started for me.
And original Mill Sparks made 1AT from back in the day.
Yeah, this is pretty
The
cool.
gun has lived in for quite some time.
I got a 1AT the other day. Not an original, but
Anyway, great gun.